The story opens with our protagonist, Kotoba Sakai, a withdrawn shut-in, weighed down by severe social anxiety and barely noticeable in other people's lives. He rarely steps outside, but on one particular day he forces himself to the convenience store for a few groceries, only to stumble into a nightmare, a robber threatening the clerk and demanding money. In moments like this, Kotoba would normally shrink back and protect himself, yet something in him refuses to abandon the clerk to her fate. As he peers closer, a chilling realization hits him. The clerk is Isekai'd, his former classmate from college, and to make the moment even more surreal, she was also the girl he once silently admired. He never imagined he'd run into her again, especially under circumstances so dire. Kotoba has never exchanged a single proper conversation with her, so he doubts she would even recognize him now. But regardless of that painful truth, he pushes all logic aside. Instead of turning away, he charges forward to shield the woman he once cared for. The robber, startled by his sudden appearance, reacts instinctively. And instead of harming the clerk, he drives the knife straight into Kotoba's stomach. As searing pain floods his body, Kotoba struggles to stay conscious. Kasumi stands frozen, overwhelmed by fear, unable to process what just unfolded. When Kotoba forces out a plea for her to run, her instinct for survival erupts, and she bolts straight toward the exit without looking back. As his vision fades, Kotoba feels a strange, bittersweet comfort believing that in his insignificant life, he at least managed to save someone and meet his end with a sliver of purpose. Trees. But in the next moment, his soul is pulled away and summoned before a goddess, only for her to gently explain that, tragically, he died for no real reason because the woman he saved was destined to die soon anyway. Kotoba is overwhelmed. In the end, his death was as empty as he feared. Sensing his despair, the goddess expresses sympathy and offers him a reward for the courage and kindness he showed in protecting another. She speaks softly about the loneliness she could feel within him, acknowledging the hollow, aching years he lived through. Though he hesitates to admit it aloud, Kotoba knows those words are painfully true. Apologizing for making him remember those wounds, she grants him the chance to reincarnate into another world, one where he might finally feel fulfilled. He can hardly believe what he's hearing and desperately asks if reincarnation is really possible. Once she confirms it, without hesitation he accepts. The goddess expresses too. Kotoba reflects on how he was stabbed to death. He wishes for power enough strength to avoid dying so easily ever again, even if it means becoming the strongest existence in the world, so he can protect those he cares for no matter what it costs. The goddess sees no darkness in his heart. Before we continue, if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me what time it is where you're watching this manga, though she grants his wish and instructs him to prepare for rebirth. Kotoba feels a warm, comforting magic envelop him, soft and gentle, like being held by a mother, and for a moment he senses himself transcending beyond human limits. But in the very next heartbeat, his consciousness awakens inside a small plant, leaving him in complete confusion. He expected an unbreakable, invincible body, yet the goddess turned him into a plant. Disappointment hits him instantly. And moments later, he's stomped flat by a passing fat human, a man on his way to gang up on someone with his friends. They clearly look like troublemakers closing in on a helpless victim. They're bullying a gentle farmer with low standing in the village, while the fat one appears to be the village chief's son, used to bossing around anyone beneath him. When they finally leave, the exhausted farmer notices the crushed plant, and Kotoba panics, thinking he'll be stepped on again and this time won't survive. But instead, the farmer kneels down in concern to check if the plant is all right. Even though the plant has nothing to do with him, he still worries someone might accidentally trample it again, so he builds a small fence around it, ensuring it stands out and won't be harmed so easily again. Then, with a gentle smile, he walks away, simply returning to his ordinary life. Kotoba, however, is deeply touched by the man's unexpected kindness. Regret washes over him for having misjudged the man earlier. He wishes he could thank him and vows never to forget this simple act of compassion. Without his awareness, a soft beam of light flows out from Kotoba and drifts gently into the farmer's body. Yet the man doesn't feel a thing and simply heads home. A few hours later, the brutal heat of the Suva. Sunlight begins to scorch the fragile plant that is Kotoba. With no way to obtain water on his own, he feels himself drying out, slowly wilting under the merciless heat. He desperately wishes someone would come to water him as his stem bends weakly under the strain of dehydration. Right then, a slime appears before him, and upon spotting the withering plant, it sprinkles water over Kotoba, reviving him with cool, life-giving moisture. Kotoba is grateful beyond words for this gentle creature, though he notices its body shrinking as it continues watering him. Yet despite that, the slime seems strangely content. Kotoba realizes the slime is willingly sacrificing its own body just to keep him alive, caring nothing for its own condition. Saved once again, Kotoba watches as the slime leaves quietly, like a humble hero. He silently prays for the slime's happiness. And without his knowledge, another warm glow rises from him and drifts down onto the slime. From that day onward, the slime returns daily to water Kotoba, each time restoring its size somewhere else before coming back. It always arrives large and full, and always returns home small and drained after watering him. Whenever the slime travels to replenish its own water, it constantly finds its thoughts drifting back to the lonely plant named Kotoba. Out of worry, it returns every single day to care for him. Meanwhile, around this same time in the nearby village, a priest is conducting the adult ceremony for youths who have reached adulthood this year. During the ritual, they receive gifts from the gods and awaken their skills. Based on these skills, they will choose their future professions, and the kind young man from earlier eagerly wonders what ability fate will grant him. Once the priest's prayer ended, he instructed the young participants to line up before the crystal. Alto, the same kind-hearted boy from earlier, was shoved aside by the very same fatty who had bullied him before, sneering that Alto shouldn't even dream of receiving a decent skill. The bully bragged that he would undoubtedly awaken the legendary Sword Saint ability. Alto, unfazed by the absurd boast, simply replied with a calm, "Sure," and stepped forward when his name was called. Placing his hand atop the crystal, he held his breath, eager and a little anxious to see what skill and status awaited him. Suddenly, the crystal pulsed with an unusual glow, and then it erupted with a radiance far brighter than any child's turn before him. His status appeared, revealing he possessed the blessing of the World Tree, a divine gift that doubled whatever he earned, from adventurer experience points to money. The priest stared in disbelief, stunned by a skill he had never encountered in all his years. Recovering quickly, he praised Alto warmly and announced the arrival of an extraordinary ability this year, the World Tree's blessing. Alto's parents were overjoyed, their pride shining like sunlight. Meanwhile, Gerudo, the fatty, burned with jealousy and loudly insisted he would obtain an even greater gift. The priest then called Gerudo forward for his ceremony, and the fatty froze in shock when the crystal revealed he had been cursed with a crippling 120% stat debuff. He couldn't fathom how he ended up with such a ruinous fate. Even his father, the village chief, was furious, humiliated by his son's disgrace in front of everyone. After the ceremony concluded, the crowd gradually left the church. One of Alto's friends approached him, asking whether he truly intended to leave the village and become an adventurer. Alto confirmed it without hesitation. Hearing that, she encouraged him, certain he'd thrive out there. As Alto tested his new ability, a World Tree emblem shimmered onto the back of his right hand, confirming his suspicion that the tiny sapling in the forest was indeed a World Tree. He couldn't have hoped for a fate more fortunate. Over the years, Alto blossomed into a renowned adventurer. By the time he chose to retire, 20 years had passed, and he returned home ready to settle down peacefully. In time, he even had a son. Alto shared the story of how he once received a divine blessing from the World Tree growing in the nearby forest. He taught his son, Jiru, that kindness toward others, and especially toward the World Tree, was a virtue to be upheld. Jiru took those teachings deeply to heart. Alto then mentioned he needed to visit the World Tree again to rebuild the old fence he had made so long ago. He instructed Jiru to head out first, promising to follow soon. Jiru obeyed and ventured into the forest to search for the World Tree. Meanwhile, in those 20 years, Kotoba had grown immensely. Now, towering at around 2 meters in height, he finally deserved to be called a tree rather than the fragile plant he once was. With his impressive size, he felt confident no one would trample him again. Yet something troubled him. His growth had begun slowing down considerably. At that moment, Jiru arrived and spotted the tree his father had spoken of, the one believed to be the World Tree. Kotoba, however, had no idea why this young human kept calling him that. Jiru noticed the crumbling fence around him and decided it needed repairing. Kotoba panicked. What was this human doing dismantling the only thing, aside from the loyal slime, that had stayed with him all these years? As Jiru cleared away the old fence and tidied the area, Kotoba felt strangely vulnerable and exposed. Then Jiru clasped his hands together and began to pray. He thanked Kotoba for bestowing divine protection upon his father. Only then did Kotoba realize the resemblance was unmistakable. The boy looked just like the kind farmer from 20 years ago who had built that fence for him. Maybe this child really was the son of that kind-hearted man. The thought hit him like a quiet revelation. Just then, a fatty called out to Jiru, likely the son of the previous fatty who had been cursed long ago. He announced he wanted to practice his sword on the tree behind Jiru. But Jiru stepped forward to block him, declaring he would never allow anyone to harm the World Tree. He insisted that one day the tree would grow into something magnificent. The fatty scoffed, finding it ridiculous that such a scrawny tree could be the legendary World Tree. He grabbed Jiru by the collar, threatening him to move aside or be crushed first. As the fatty raised his sword, Jiru swiftly dodged with surprising agility, then snatched up a sturdy wooden stick to defend himself. He warned the fatty to stop. He had no desire to fight, but the fatty refused to listen, so Jiru countered. In a quick exchange, he struck back and managed to knock the fatty's weapon to the ground. The bully stared in disbelief, shaken by the sudden defeat. Yet even then, he refused to back down and threw a wild punch at Jiru in anger. At that moment, a voice commanded them both to stop. It was Alto, the respected adventurer of the town, who firmly warned the fatty never to lay a hand on the tree. He reminded them all to respect nature, lest they face its wrath. Enraged and humiliated, the fatty stormed off toward home. Alto then turned to Jiru, praising him for skillfully using the techniques he had taught him to defend the World Tree. Afterwards, the two rebuilt a brand new fence around Kotoba, and Kotoba felt an overwhelming warmth from their kindness, wishing them both happiness from the depths of his heart. Yet he couldn't help questioning why they kept referring to him as the World Tree, a title that echoed in his mind with a strange and unsettling weight. After they departed, Kotoba's life slipped back into quiet stillness, though an uneasy thought lingered. His growth as a tree remained painfully slow. Days blurred into an empty monotony, gnawing at him with a boredom so deep it almost felt suffocating. Then, breaking the silence like a ripple in a stagnant pond, a mass of slime appeared and began watering him with deliberate care. The moment Kotoba recognized it as the same slime from long ago, now larger, stronger, and more confident, his heart stirred with a sudden spark of wonder, hinting that something unexpected was about to unfold. Gratitude welled within him for everything the slime continued to do. Its loyalty, its gentle care, none of it felt small to him anymore. Soon he noticed the slime hadn't come alone. Just like their mother, the slime's tiny offspring eagerly joined in, surrounding him and watering him from every side with innocent determination. Their effort impressed Kotoba deeply. After taking turns and working tirelessly, the family of slimes finished their task, leaving him feeling relieved water shortages were no longer a threat, at least for now. Over the next several years, Kotoba's body stretched even taller, gaining another 3 meters. Each inch of growth filled him with a quiet sense of accomplishment. But eventually, that upward climb stalled once again. The sudden halt made him wonder if this land itself had begun to run out of nourishment for him, an unsettling possibility. Then, rustling emerged from the forest brush, and a wolf stepped out with tense, uneasy movements. The creature seemed troubled by something, and its wary eyes fixed themselves on the Kotoba tree before it, as if searching for answers. Kotoba watched, unsure what the wolf intended to do. Just then, he witnessed a sight so unexpected it left him stunned and speechless. The wolf calmly relieved itself right beside him, leaving its excrement at Kotoba's roots as if this were perfectly normal behavior. Being rooted to the ground, Kotoba couldn't avoid it no matter how much he wished to. He simply had to endure the moment until the wolf finished and trotted off. The incident left Kotoba shaken, even a bit traumatized. However, he suddenly noticed an astonishing burst of rapid growth. The realization hit him hard. The wolf's excrement acted as a powerful fertilizer. Against all expectations, he found himself feeling grateful for the wolf's unintended gift, and without realizing it, he blessed the wolf in return, granting it good fortune. The next day, the same wolf returned. Kotoba noticed the wolf had grown remarkably, its stature now larger and its presence sharper. The creature even spoke, apologizing for what it had done the previous day, ashamed of its rudeness toward the tree. Gaining newfound intelligence from the blessing, the wolf poured out its sincerity, and Kotoba felt no resentment at all. In truth, he was thankful. The wolf, inspired by a new idea, decided to go a step further and brought animals it had hunted in the forest. Confidently, it believed these creatures would strengthen Kotoba's nourishment even more. After the wolf and its pack buried the remains of their prey at Kotoba's roots, they placed simple prayers before the so-called World Tree and quietly departed, and Kotoba felt it immediately. The nutrients from the corpses seeped into the soil, invigorating him. The wolves returned often, offering more remains as offerings. Thanks to their efforts, Kotoba continued to grow beautifully. Eventually, he even gained a new companion, a spider who made its home among his branches. Kotoba soon towered above 7 meters. One day, a group of humans approached. Pride swelled in him as he realized how tall and magnificent he had become. He assumed they were people from Alto's village and thus posed no danger. But when an old man casually suggested cutting the tree down for lumber, Kotoba froze in disbelief. This was not the fate he ever imagined. The spider trembled with concern as the humans advanced with axes in hand, prepared to cleave him apart. Kotoba desperately wished to plead for his life, but his silent cries couldn't reach their ears. Suddenly, the wolf pack emerged once more, right on the brink of disaster. They charged fearlessly, planting themselves between the humans and the tree, determined to guard Kotoba from those who sought to fell the World Tree. The humans recoiled in terror at the wolf's fierce presence and blazing eyes. Their fear was so overwhelming that they backed away. Kotoba could hardly believe it. Were they truly protecting him? Yet the humans couldn't understand what was happening at all. They simply abandoned the idea of chopping down the towering tree, intimidated by the wolves' hostility. They apologized for attempting to cut him, and Kotoba felt a surge of gratitude toward the wolves who arrived at the perfect moment to save him. He wished deeply that he could speak to them directly, yet once again, his silent blessings flowed to them without him noticing. Meanwhile, the disappointed humans walked away, pondering why the wolves had blocked their way. They searched for another tree instead, hoping to find one as tall as the previous giant. None of them realized that a lurking demon had fixed its gaze upon them, foreshadowing the chaos soon to follow. Time moved on, and Kotoba continued growing peacefully. Eventually, his tree form produced fruit. He wasn't sure what type of fruit it was, and unfortunately, he couldn't taste it himself. Then, as always, the familiar slime arrived to water him. Kotoba watched the gentle creature with warm appreciation for its unwavering care. Wanting to express his gratitude in some small way, he decided to offer the slime one of his fruits, and so he gently released a fruit from his branches, letting it fall before the loyal slime, and the large one immediately began devouring the fruit, its movements eager and unrestrained, as if it had waited its whole life for this moment, a sight that quietly hinted something extraordinary was about to unfold. The slime trembled with sheer delight as it tasted the fruit, its wobbling form practically glowing with happiness, proof that the flavor was incredible beyond words, leaving Kotoba wondering what such joy could possibly lead to. Then, without warning, its entire body burst into radiant light, mana surging outward like a tidal wave gathering strength before crashing down. In that rising brilliance, the slime changed, its form climbing to a grand pinnacle, until it stood reborn as the majestic Slime Queen, a transformation that left the air thick with awe. The true shock came when the newly crowned queen opened her mouth and spoke, her voice echoing with unexpected grace. She offered heartfelt gratitude to the world tree for granting her the evolution fruit, and Kotoba felt relieved, almost touched, that she truly liked it. Through this moment, he also realized that the fruit growing on him was none other than the evolution fruit itself, an unsettling yet intriguing revelation. Wanting to return a bit of kindness, he offered the same fruit to the wolves as thanks for bringing nutrients to him. After savoring the rich sweetness of the fruit, the wolves suddenly gleamed with blinding light. They evolved as well, rising into higher forms that now carried distinctly humanoid features, their new shapes filled with startling power. Even the wolves themselves were overwhelmed by their own transformation, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. They had never encountered anything like this before, and it was then they finally understood. The world tree's fruit was the cause of their evolution. With this realization, they offered prayers of gratitude to the world tree and decided to settle within the forest. But with only 4 of them, they knew they couldn't protect such a sacred being alone. So, they resolved to return to their former homeland and bring more of their pack here, determined to build better lives under the world tree's protection. Before departing, they thanked the world tree once more and vowed to repay this kindness. Kotoba watched their higher forms walk away on 2 legs, startled as they began calling him World Tree. His growth and towering height really were far beyond normal trees. Could that be why? Even so, being called a world tree still felt excessively grand to him, almost too much to accept. After that, time quietly slipped by, till one day, a group of humans appeared before him, their steps heady with worry. They were distressed over an elderly man addressed as a high priest who had fallen seriously ill from an unknown disease. Kotoba could tell by their attire and behavior that they belonged to some religious organization. He wondered if perhaps he could help them in some way, so he let one of his apples drop, and a human gently picked it up. With hope outweighing their fear, they served the fruit to the high priest, praying it would at least grant him a bit of strength. The high priest ate the fruit hesitantly, as if unsure whether to trust this strange offering. Yet the very next moment, a miracle occurred. His vitality returned in an instant. He rose to his feet with renewed strength, and the others rushed to ask if he was all right. The high priest proclaimed that the fruit borne by this tree possessed mysterious power capable of curing anything. He believed this must be the divine tree mentioned in their scriptures, and at once everyone began worshipping it earnestly. Kotoba felt they were overreacting, but he was relieved he managed to save the old man's life. As they departed, Kotoba noticed the religious insignia on the backs of their garments. A few days later, a forest lizard wandered by. It picked up and tasted one of the fallen fruits. Kotoba felt as though some unseen force was attracting all kinds of beings to him now, and right then, he watched the lizard transform into a full-fledged lizard man. The creature expressed immense gratitude, having been starving before this miraculous evolution. As thanks, he reached into his mouth and retrieved something. He admitted it wasn't much, but wished to offer it to the world tree regardless. Kotoba was confused, so the lizard man explained. It was a Dragonite gemstone, a rare magical mineral created inside a lizardman's body. After giving it to him, the lizardman thanked the world tree once again and departed, promising to return someday. Kotoba, however, felt the gemstone was essentially useless to him. More importantly, he wondered what the term world tree truly meant in this world, and how people kept identifying him as one. For now, he decided to simply observe and let events unfold naturally. Much later, a strange man appeared before him. The man respectfully addressed the tree and asked if he could take the gemstone resting there. Kotoba didn't mind at all. The merchant suddenly began to weep as he introduced himself as Makuro, a merchant who had been betrayed by his caravan and abandoned in the forest. But with the world tree fruit and the gemstone he'd found here, he felt as though divine protection had finally reached him. Filled with gratitude, he took the gemstone to heart. Afterward, Makuro traveled to a human town and had the stone appraised. When it was identified as the legendary Dragonite gemstone, chaos erupted as everyone sought to buy it. Makuro then had her status checked again and discovered she had received the blessing of the world tree. granting her remarkable luck and elevated status. She was overjoyed to confirm that the tree truly was the world tree, just as she suspected. Later, she returned to Kotoba to thank him and share great news. Makuro had purchased all the land surrounding this area, declaring that from now on he would protect the world tree as repayment for the divine protection granted to him. Kotoba appreciated Makuro's sincere intentions, feeling grateful in return. Soon after, Makuro's men placed a signboard before the tree warning any travelers not to dare cut it down. Makuro expressed his hope that the world tree would continue watching over him, and from that day onward his private army patrolled the area regularly, guarding the land with great care. But the peace did not last long. For some humans, suddenly a group of humans arrived and began digging around the world tree without hesitation. They were followers of the same religious order led by the high priest who had once been saved by the divine fruit. Kotoba desperately wished they would stop, but the high priest insisted on taking the world tree back to their headquarters so they could cherish it exclusively, as if it belonged only to them. When Makuro and his men reached the scene, they shouted furiously at the cult members and drove those zealots out, firmly declaring the land as private property of the Makuro Merchant Company. After the intruders were expelled, Kotoba felt deeply grateful for Makuro's protection, allowing him to enjoy peace again, at least for a while. As winter approached, Kotoba had grown even larger than before, but he never imagined that cold could trouble a tree. He learned that painful truth the hard way. On top of that, insects began burrowing into his bark and making their home within his body, causing him even more discomfort. If they were cute insects, he might have tolerated them, but these unsettling, creepy bugs crawling through him made his entire being shudder, yet he was powerless to remove them. He wished desperately that he could do something, anything. Then, from above, the spider descended, gracefully taking charge by hunting down every bug infesting him. Kotoba realized it was a cave spider, one that had quietly been his ally since the very beginning. Normally, cave spiders lived in caverns, at least according to what Kotoba had heard from humans, so he wondered why this one had chosen to remain here of all places. Still, he couldn't thank the spider enough for ridding him of the pests. Out of gratitude, he dropped a fruit for her. After eating the fruit, the spider evolved into a forest spider. She then wove vast sheets of silk around the entire tree, wrapping him like a protective cloak. Kotoba was touched more than ever by her devotion. He silently wished she would stay by his side forever. As winter deepened, fierce snowstorms swept through the forest, and one day, an unexpected group of monsters emerged from the woods. It was a pack of goblins, dozens of them. Shockingly, one among them could speak. When the goblin leader gazed up at the tree, he sensed a divine presence radiating from it, along with an unfathomable power. Drawn by that aura, he decided they would build a new village right here. Kotoba wasn't sure whether this would bring trouble or opportunity. Over time, the goblins gathered wood from the surrounding forest, crafting homes from the trees nearby. By observing how they worked around him, Kotoba realized they had no intention of cutting him down. They were actually planning to keep him at the center of their new village. As long as he wouldn't be chopped down, he was perfectly fine with that. Noticing their hard effort, he decided to help by dropping one of his branches for them. The goblin leader was stunned when the world tree gifted them a branch. To them, it meant the world tree was welcoming them in its own way, a blessing they didn't take lightly. They collected the precious branch and stored it carefully for its most meaningful use. Every house in the village was built using ordinary wood, but the leader's home was constructed from the branch of the world tree itself. Kotoba noticed how superior the quality of his wood was compared to other trees, and it made sense that the goblins chose to use it for their leader's dwelling, treating it as something of immense value. When the settlement was finally complete, the goblins raised their voices in celebration, lifting their gaze toward Kotoba. The sight warmed the heart of our protagonist. They held a joyous festival to mark the beginning of their new home, and once the celebration ended, the goblins poured some of their liquor at the tree's base as an offering. Kotoba absorbed the liquor through his roots and was delighted by its rich, delicious taste. The village continued to grow steadily, and because food was scarce in the early days, Kotoba dropped fruits from time to time, and the goblins happily devoured the world tree fruits with great appreciation. Through eating the fruits, everyone in the village eventually evolved into greater goblins. Even the weakest goblins gained the ability to speak, and with their evolution, they developed more human-like appearances, no longer resembling the short, frail creatures they once were. The female goblins gained charming features and healthy figures that could easily be mistaken for ordinary humans. The male goblins, now sturdier and more muscular, took charge of all the heavy labor. Kotoba couldn't help thinking they resembled orcs more than goblins at this point. Every night, the goblins would dance, feast, and celebrate as though holding a festival, and Kotoba eagerly looked forward to these lively moments. Meanwhile, the spiders living on his branches coexisted peacefully with the goblins, benefiting each other without the slightest conflict. The spider found comfort living on the tree, never once feeling out of place. One day, when the goblins approached her as they usually did, they were stunned to see something had changed. She had evolved into a more advanced form, Arachne. Now able to speak clearly, she conversed naturally with the goblins, who by now were capable of ordinary speech as well. They discussed various things, and Kotoba found their lively exchanges enjoyable to witness. Later on, it became firmly established that Arachne and her small spiders would live atop the tree while the goblins resided below. The goblins traded their liquor with Arachne in exchange for the clothes she wove, and she even crafted futons for them, while the goblins built tree houses for her brood. This created a perfect balance for both sides, keeping their relationship mutually beneficial as the village continued to advance day by day. With a rare moment of calm, Kotoba decided to give each goblin a name, hoping it would strengthen their bond. For the leader, he chose the simple name Linda, an act that quietly marked a new chapter for their growing community. He then named the strongest goblin Gonza, acknowledging the sheer power that made him stand out among the others. The most adorable goblin, the one who loved weaving alongside the Arachne, received the name Henri, an endearing choice that made her smile with bright curiosity. The goblin with the most prominent chest became Curran, while the smallest among them earned the fitting name Gobchin. Life drifted warmly in this little settlement, and before Kotoba realized it, countless lives were now thriving around him, with their world subtly revolving around his presence, almost like the heart of a quiet miracle. Yet beneath that peace, one problem lingered. The goblins still couldn't find a solution to the worsening food shortage. Gonza explained that the creatures roaming the area were all far too powerful, making hunting nearly impossible. His frustration exposed just how dire their situation had become. The goblins had no idea what to do next, and the anxiety in their voices hinted at a future that could collapse if nothing changed soon. A sinking realization washed over Kotoba. He might be the cause of the crisis. For years, he had offered fruits to the surrounding monsters, and those fruits had strengthened them, pushing their evolution forward until some even gained humanoid appearances and advanced abilities, making them impossible prey. Without meaning to, he had disrupted the entire ecosystem of the forest, tipping the balance in ways he never intended. But even if he wanted to fix it, he couldn't simply walk over and help. His immobility bound him to this single place, helplessly rooted. Still, he tried once more to move. To his astonishment, one of his roots twitched ever so slightly. That tiny movement sparked an idea. Kotoba guided a root, coaxing it gently toward the surface. And the moment it broke through the ground, a fragile hope stirred within him. If only this root could transform, become something useful, something edible for them. He imagined a daikon. And unbelievably, the root reshaped itself into one right before his eyes, as if answering his unspoken wish. The revelation widened his understanding of his powers, igniting a sense of wonder that hadn't stirred in years. He tried the same method again, this time thinking of strawberries, and it succeeded flawlessly. The result left him stunned. It was incredible, almost too miraculous to be real. With this newfound ability, Kotoba could finally assist the goblins, producing all kinds of vegetables underground and channeling them upward to sustain the village. Several days passed like this, until eventually, the vegetables he created were discovered by the villagers. They marveled at them in disbelief, wondering if these were blessings from the world tree itself. Their curiosity pushed them to investigate, and soon, they found the truth. They sampled the vegetables cautiously, testing them one bite at a time, and quickly realized not only were they safe to eat, but astonishingly delicious. Word of their taste spread throughout the village like wildfire. Before long, everyone began cooking these vegetables, turning them into daily meals. Just like that, the food crisis was solved. The villagers celebrated the bounty bestowed upon them by the world tree, embracing every meal with gratitude. Kotoba felt a warm satisfaction knowing he could finally repay the goblins for all their kindness. With food secured, the goblins expanded their agriculture, cultivating more and more crops. In an astonishingly short time, their village flourished. Whenever they held a celebration, they now prepared a bowl of vegetable soup as an offering to the world tree, thanking him in their own heartfelt way. But one evening, a goblin rushed in with panic in his voice. Henri hadn't returned. Soon word spread. She had been captured by goblins from a neighboring settlement. Rage erupted from Gonza, his fury sharp and immediate. The chief's face tightened with concern, while Linda's instinct leaned toward resolving things peacefully. He forced Gonza to calm down before taking action. Even Kotoba understood why someone might have taken Henri. She was undeniably adorable. Still, worry clung to him like a shadow. At that moment, the Arachne approached Linda, firmly expressing her desire to join the rescue effort. Linda gathered their people, preparing them to leave, hoping for peace but ready for violence if forced into it. With both paths in mind, they set forth toward the neighboring village. Kotoba watched them disappear into the forest, anxiety simmering within him. Would they settle this peacefully, or would bloodshed become unavoidable? Night fell and passed. By morning, the chief returned, and with him, Henri, unharmed yet shaken. Kotoba sensed a heaviness in the air. They had clearly chosen tougher measures. Arachne dragged several bound goblins behind her, wrapped tightly in her thread. Those captives begged for forgiveness. They explained that the monsters in the forest had become too strong to hunt, so in desperation, they kidnapped Henri to demand food. Gonza refused to forgive them, yet Linda acknowledged their struggle, recognizing how starvation had pushed them that far. Henri pleaded for understanding, saying their settlement was facing genuine hardship. She asked Linda to help them if possible. After some thought, Linda agreed if they promised not to repeat their crimes. Their village could use extra hands in the fields anyway. That night, the entire village erupted into celebration for Henri's safe return. Linda and the others took part wholeheartedly, joy spreading across their faces like firelight. Kotoba quietly observed, realizing these goblins seemed to celebrate every little thing, but perhaps this festival was meant to lift Henri's spirits after the ordeal. When the festivities calmed, Henri called Gonza aside and confessed her feelings for him. Kotoba, still a rooted loner, could only wish he could slip away from the scene, but watching the goblins form bonds of their own carried a small, bittersweet charm, so he accepted it. Later, the slimes returned once more, as they always did, arriving to water the world tree. The goblins greeted them with respect, honoring the peaceful rhythm their lives had finally regained. The goblins eventually realized the slimes weren't just watering the ground, they were doing it for the world tree's sake. They thanked the slimes sincerely for their devotion, and Kotoba felt relieved that both sides treated each other kindly. After all, if any dispute broke out between them, he wouldn't be able to intervene even if he tried. But then something unexpected happened, something unrelated to the slimes or the village's daily rhythm. A young goblin child quietly sat beside the world tree's base. Kotoba remembered her clearly. He had named her Miyako. He wondered softly whether she needed something from him. But her answer came swiftly. She needed nothing. The simple response startled him. It was as though she understood him directly, something no one had done before. Testing his suspicion, he asked her if she could truly hear him. Miyako replied without hesitation. She not only heard him, she claimed she could see his human form and soul within the tree. With certainty settling in, Kotoba wondered why only she possessed this ability while others didn't. Miyako admitted she didn't know the reason, but she guessed it might relate to some sort of magical wavelength. Kotoba was puzzled. He had never imagined magic could have wavelengths like sound or light. Still, he had noticed something ever since the goblins settled here. His growth had accelerated, likely because he absorbed small traces of magic from them. Miyako agreed this could be the cause, adding that if she could hear him, perhaps she could help him communicate with everyone. When she asked whether he truly wanted to speak with the entire village, Kotoba answered honestly. Of course he did. Loneliness had wrapped around him for years with no one to talk to. All he could do was silently watch others from afar, wishing he could join in. Miyako offered to interpret his words for everyone. Kotoba accepted and appointed her as the World Tree's shrine maiden. When the village chief heard her claim, he questioned whether she was telling the truth. Miyako insisted loudly that she could hear the World Tree, so Linda decided to test her claim. If she spoke the truth, the World Tree should drop a fruit. Kotoba dropped one immediately. It fell straight onto Linda's head. That single strike erased any remaining doubt. Linda then asked the World Tree if it was acceptable to inform everyone. Miyako conveyed Kotoba's permission. Soon after, Linda prepared a gathering. Miyako sat on a raised platform as the village assembled, and Linda announced the beginning of their first exchange meeting with the World Tree. Linda began by asking if the World Tree had any questions. Kotoba spoke through Miyako, and after hearing his thoughts, she asked what had happened with Gonza and Henri. Linda didn't recognize the names, so Miyako explained that the World Tree had personally given them their names. Linda was honored and humbly asked what name the World Tree had given him. Through Miyako, Kotoba shared everyone's names, starting with Linda, and the entire crowd grew delighted upon hearing them. They appreciated how much easier it became to address each other now. Then Kotoba, through Miyako, asked again what became of Gonza and Henri. The villagers grew flustered, and Miyako relayed Kotoba's message, a simple blessing for them to live happily ever after. With this new connection and understanding, peace settled warmly over the village. The next day, a goblin returned home carrying an orc with him. The moment the chief saw the orc, he was stunned. He welcomed Benjamin back and immediately asked how he injured his arm. Benjamin explained he had only scratched it while subduing prey. More importantly, he had found this orc wandering lost in the forest. The orc, who could speak clearly, said his name was Ode. He had been saved by Benjamin and now wished to work in the village. Linda gladly welcomed him. Orcs were known for their strength and rarely appeared near goblin settlements. Linda brought the orc to the World Tree to introduce him properly. After explaining everything, he left Ode in Kotoba's care. The goblins welcomed the orc warmly. Miyako noted how rare it was to encounter an orc, since they weren't nearly as common as goblins. But she added bluntly that orcs were often foolish and struggled to maintain stable tribes. Because of their low intelligence, they couldn't compete with higher species. However, they could coexist with goblins, and Ode wished to work with them from now on. Linda suggested naming the orc Orugu and asked the World Tree if the name was acceptable. Kotoba approved it, and with that, the village joyfully welcomed a new companion. Miyako then presented a fruit from the World Tree as a formal gesture of their welcome. After taking it, Orugu evolved on the spot into a high orc. He instantly began speaking with refined manners, expressing his gratitude and eagerness to work alongside everyone. A few days later, Kotoba noticed something, a distant shape he couldn't quite identify, leaving him wondering what it might be, and when he looked more closely, a jolt ran through him. He recognized the approaching figures as the very pack of werewolves he once relied on for nourishment, a reunion he never expected to stir such unease. They were the same group that had brought him vital nutrients before, a memory that resurfaced with surprising warmth. It had been quite some time since their last encounter, yet now that they had returned, their sudden arrival carried a weight that hinted at trouble. The wolf leader glared at the sight before him, completely baffled that a village had already been built around the world tree he had once claimed as his future home. Seeing others living in the place he longed for ignited a deep, simmering fury within him. With that anger boiling over, he roared at the villagers, demanding to know what they thought they were doing, his voice slicing through the air like a threat of what might come next. The goblins immediately sensed the tension and spotted the wolves. As the wolf leader continued shouting, accusing them of stealing the land he viewed as his own, Kotoba felt dread rising. The village chief, Linda, stiffened at the sight of the wolves barreling toward them in a hostile charge. Bonsa and the others quickly stepped forward, gripping their spears with trembling determination. They confronted the wolves, declaring loudly that this was their village and ordering the intruders to leave at once. Kotoba's heart clenched. He couldn't allow a clash to break out. He desperately wanted to stop them before blood was shed. His body began shaking violently, unintentionally giving the impression that the world tree itself was enraged and demanding the wolves to back off. But Kotoba quickly realized this misunderstanding was only making things worse. Acting fast, he searched for Miyako and whispered urgently for her to intervene and stop the fight. She rushed over to the village chief with determined steps. Then she conveyed the world tree's message to Linda, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing around them. Linda raised his hand, halting Gonsa and the others, and relayed the world tree's words. Although the goblins lowered their weapons, tension still hung thick in the air like a blade waiting to fall. The werewolves, however, refused to stand down so easily. The wolf leader shouted back, demanding to know what nonsense they were spouting about hearing the world tree. He accused them of making things up out of fear, refusing to believe a word of it. To him, the goblins were nothing more than parasites leeching off the world tree's power, a belief that added fuel to his rage. Then, at that fragile moment, a young wolf girl stepped forward, declaring that the child among the goblins was right. She revealed the world tree didn't want them to fight. She explained that she too could hear the world tree's voice because she served as a shrine maiden. At first confused, the wolf leader questioned her insistently, only to slowly grasp the truth. Kotoba felt a wave of relief wash over him. At last, someone from their side could understand him too. And that realization sparked a quiet curiosity in Kotoba about whether others around the world might also hear his voice. For now, though, both wolves and goblins finally stood face to face without hostility. Kotoba urged both shrine maidens, the goblin girl and the wolf child to convey his message that violence must never take root here. He had them speak his words simultaneously, that the world tree belonged to no one and everyone must unite and live harmoniously. Hearing their synchronized voices, the wolf leader finally believed them. A thick fog of misunderstanding dissolved, and he turned to the goblin chief to apologize, admitting he had assumed they intended to exploit the world tree for wicked purposes. Linda assured him that was never the case, and apologized as well for speaking harshly earlier. He then welcomed the werewolves into the village, sealing their newfound truce. Soon after, both chiefs held a meeting at Linda's home. Through honest conversation, the werewolf chief decided to settle peacefully beside the goblins. Together, they would protect the world tree, standing as united guardians. The decision felt like a turning point. Everyone approved of the outcome. Kotoba especially felt warmth bloom within him. That night, he witnessed the goblins throwing a lively welcome party for their new allies, the wolves. He felt genuinely relieved that they had reconciled despite their rough beginning, and the village's structure had now expanded in fascinating ways. After the wolves officially joined, Kotoba gave the wolf leader the name Wolfram. He also named the wolf children Mimiko. Later, the goblin chief offered vegetables to the wolves, but as strict carnivores, they couldn't eat them. Still, the contrast between both species revealed unexpected harmony. On the other hand, the wolves' combat prowess was undeniable, even within the dense forest. They were exceptional hunters, able to bring down prey with ease. Thanks to their efforts, even the goblins now enjoyed a steady supply of meat. With the wolves' unmatched strength and the goblins' skill in crafting and construction, their cooperation became a perfect, mutually beneficial partnership. Adding to that, Arachne provided futons and clothing. Though the wolves already had thick fur, they still appreciated the comforting warmth of these gifts. And just like that, the village flourished as a multi-species home, growing stronger each day. Before long, the slimes arrived again to water the world tree. This time, the slime queen had evolved even further now, appearing in a humanoid form. She remarked that although she hadn't visited in a while, the village had changed dramatically. The villagers asked whether she needed anything. She introduced herself as the slime girl who had long tended the world tree by bringing it water. She turned to the wolves, curious if they now lived in this place as well. The village chief recognized her immediately as the slime queen he had met before. Once he confirmed she was indeed an ally, they welcomed her inside and apologized for not realizing she was a benefactor of the world tree. Kotoba remembered clearly she had been the first to ever offer him water, and now she had transformed into this human-like slime form. He recalled the name he once imagined for her, Catherine. Linda warmly welcomed her and asked if she needed anything at all. Catherine expressed a simple wish. She wanted to live here as well, and Linda accepted her without hesitation. She explained that she and the other slimes could offer various forms of help, such as cleansing filth or breaking down harmful toxins. With Catherine leading the slimes, the village welcomed them warmly, unsure yet excited about how much this addition might change their daily lives. Kotoba felt genuinely relieved by her presence, carrying a quiet sense of gratitude for everything she had done for him in the past. Before long, the goblin chief arranged a home for Catherine and the other slimes. The wolves even invited her to join them while fishing, creating a surprisingly wholesome scene. And just like that, she and all the slimes eased naturally into village life, blending in without conflict and bonding effortlessly with everyone. Kotoba watched his village expand gradually, each new resident bringing fresh energy and making the place feel increasingly vibrant. Meanwhile, far away from their cheerful routine, the villagers were being secretly watched by a group of humans. The observers seemed surprisingly comfortable with the idea of monsters living together peacefully. They decided they should report to Lord Makaro that everything appeared to be in order, but before they could leave, a shadowy group ambushed them, and one of the guards was stabbed by a dagger, collapsing with a sharp cry. The injured guard demanded to know who these attackers were. The remaining guards quickly understood whoever these people were, they were clearly dangerous. A fierce battle erupted between the guards and the unknown men, tension snapping like flames. One girl from the guard's side conjured fire magic, blasting open an escape route through the chaos. Then she masked their trail with a smokescreen, their urgent priority now clear. They had to report this threat to Lord Makaro immediately. The attackers, it turned out, were members of the same cult from before back again to steal the World Tree. Their goal was to seize the World Tree before anyone else could, even if it meant cutting down anyone who got in their way. Their high priest wanted to display their strength to the merchant Makaro, who had interfered with their schemes before. This time, he swore to prevent anyone from reaching the World Tree. He ordered his followers to ambush and conquer the World Tree. With their objective set, the cultists began advancing toward the sacred tree, but they soon encountered something they never expected. A thriving monster village standing before them. Linda stepped forward, demanding to know why they were here and warning them that approaching any further would bring consequences. The high priest sneered, declaring war on the monsters, calling them filth unworthy of being near the World Tree. As the cultists charged, Gonza urgently asked Linda what they should do since the World Tree didn't belong to any single group. But seeing the hostility in the humans' eyes, Linda ordered all guards to halt their advance immediately. The high orc stepped into the fight next, towering like a wall of muscle and fury. The cult members froze in shock. None of them expected a high orc to be present here. Their surprise only grew as werewolves leapt from the shadows to join the battle. Arachne joined in as well, and combined, the monster's strength was overwhelming. Realizing how outmatched they were, the high priest clenched his teeth. He shouted for retreat, and just like that, the monster secured a decisive victory. Miyako encouraged everyone with warm praise, then delivered a message from Kotoba. He had something important to tell them. First, Kotoba expressed his gratitude for protecting him from those strange attackers. Linda brushed it off, saying it was only natural to defend the World Tree. He added that they managed to prepare because the World Tree had warned Miyako beforehand. Kotoba himself had heard distant fighting earlier when Makaro's guards clashed with the cult. Thanks to that sound, he had been alerted before danger arrived, but now he knew trouble was far from over. Those cult fanatics would keep coming, stirring conflict again and again. Kotoba wished they would simply give up and leave the village alone. The next morning, after the cult attack had been repelled, Makaro and his people finally arrived. Kotoba informed everyone ahead of time that Makaro was not an enemy, so there was no need to be wary. Linda and the others greeted him neutrally, asking what he wanted. Makaro raised his hands to show he meant no harm, and Linda, as chief, asked why he had come. Makaro stated he was glad they were protecting the World Tree. He too had once been saved by it, and thus stood on their side as a fellow protector. He pointed out the signboard he had placed earlier, explaining that this land fell under his jurisdiction. He had stationed guards to keep out intruders like the cultists from the previous day. Linda took this in and asked if he had been watching over the village as well. Makaro admitted he had indeed known about the village for some time. Since they were protecting the World Tree, he had chosen not to interfere. He hadn't revealed himself earlier because he didn't want to scare them. After all, he was human and they were monsters. But yesterday, one of his scouts had been attacked and injured. The cult would certainly return, likely stronger than before. Because of that, Makaro proposed they work together, building stronger defenses and uniting to protect the World Tree. Linda found nothing suspicious in Makaro's intentions, but he wanted to know what benefits this arrangement offered to them. He confessed he didn't want to be tricked by humans. Makaro responded by pulling out a pouch and asking Linda to smell its contents. Linda detected a strange, sharp aroma, and Makaro explained it was pepper, a valuable spice commonly sold in human markets. But since trade occurred only within human towns, monsters had no way to access markets or earn money. Therefore, as a merchant, Makaro proposed acting as their intermediary, helping the village trade goods and develop further. Linda found the idea promising, but wanted to understand what Makaro gained from this, knowing monsters had little to offer. Makaro clarified that they indeed had much to trade. Werewolves excelled at hunting and could sell fur and materials from prey. Goblins could farm vegetables for trade. Slimes could sell purified water. which was highly valuable and difficult to obtain in human regions. Arachne could trade clothes and fine fabrics she crafted, known for their exceptional quality. From all this, Makaro affirmed the village's immense potential. Linda agreed to the deal, sealing their partnership with a handshake. He then invited Makaro and his companions to continue their discussion at his home. Later on, Makaro also paid a visit to the World Tree. When she arrived, she noticed Miyako and, with genuine curiosity, asked who this unfamiliar girl was. Linda calmly explained that Miyako was a shrine maiden capable of communicating with the World Tree, and Miyako added, almost as if sharing a secret, that the World Tree wished to speak with Makaro. The atmosphere stirred, hinting that something important was about to unfold. Hearing this, Makaro's excitement rose instantly, eager to learn what the World Tree wished to tell him. He began by expressing heartfelt gratitude, thanking the World Tree for helping him in the past. It was because of that encounter, he said, that he had grown into a successful merchant, and he hoped one day to repay that kindness properly. Kotoba responded that, in truth, he should be thanking Makaro instead, since Makaro had already done more than enough, especially when he put up a protective signboard to keep the cult members away. Kotoba appreciated that deeply. As for the guard who was injured while protecting him, Kotoba offered him a fruit, and after eating it, the guard's wounds healed instantly. Overwhelmed, the man thanked the World Tree for such mercy. Kotoba then asked Makaro whether he had foreseen all of this, wondering if that was why he never interfered with the village, hoping instead to become a good trade partner and make it easier to safeguard the World Tree. But Makaro admitted he hadn't thought that far ahead. After a bit more conversation, Makaro bid farewell to the villagers and took his leave. Before departing, he expressed how much he looked forward to future trade with them. For additional vigilance, several of his guards remained behind. A house was soon built for those guards, and they eventually settled in permanently. Once trading with Makaro began, the village transformed. The arrival of spices and seasonings allowed them to enjoy a wider array of dishes. Work efficiency soared too, thanks to sturdier, high-quality tools purchased from human markets, far superior to the old goblin-made ones. Even the goblins themselves developed a fondness for human alcohol. Delighted by its rich flavor, they kept requesting more. Over time, additional beverages produced by humans flowed into the village, and everyone lived more vibrantly than ever. Just like that, several peaceful years slipped by. During these years, Kotoba grew into a truly colossal tree. At this point, Kotoba could sense a deeper change within himself, an almost divine aura surrounding him. It dawned on him that he might now be the largest tree in the entire world. The village around him had expanded dramatically as well. Calling it a small town wouldn't be exaggeration. The forest encircling the town flourished alongside its growth. Kotoba also began to feel as if he was constantly releasing some form of energy, radiating from him day and night. Earlier, he had feared that his abnormal growth would destroy the surrounding forest, but the villagers had nurtured everything with exceptional care, turning the whole region into a vast, thriving woodland. Beyond that, several major changes had taken place within the village. For instance, Linda and Miyako eventually married one another and welcomed a child named York. Since Linda was the village chief, their wedding became a grand festival, so lively that a few goblins even danced unclothed from sheer joy. Linda continued to be respected by all, though a handful quietly envied him for marrying such a young bride. Meanwhile, Gonza and Henri welcomed twins, a boy and a girl named Riku and Sora. As expected from Gonza's lineage, the twins were remarkably athletic. They also inherited their mother's good looks. Elsewhere, Benjamin surprised nearly everyone when he married one of the werewolves, Mimiko, the shrine maiden of their tribe. She lived a wonderful life with Benjamin, and together they had a son named Emerald, a half-breed blessed by both lineages. The leader of the wolves also married a beautiful wolf woman, and their child, Jonas, was destined to become the next pack leader. Meanwhile, the spider swarm grew as well, with the small spiders around Arachne evolving into jungle tarantulas. Small yet incredibly agile, they became an ideal patrol unit for the forest, swift and silent. Their presence made the perimeter safer than ever. The orcs also increased in number. Ever since Origu came to the village, they had built homes and raised families. Now about 15 orcs lived there, all serving as tank-like guardians of the World Tree. But it wasn't only the villagers whose lives had changed drastically over the years. Our protagonist, Kotoba, experienced a major turning point as well. One day, he suddenly shone with overwhelming brilliance, releasing a blinding light that rippled through the land. That radiant burst drew the attention of unexpected visitors, the elves, who had finally located the World Tree after seeing the light of rebirth. Without warning, the elves began chanting and casting magic. Shockingly, the spells were aimed directly at the monster-inhabited town. Everyone instantly sensed danger approaching. Linda and the others shouted desperately for the elves to stop, but the elves remained determined to purge anyone living near the World Tree. They combined their spells, preparing to annihilate the entire town in one devastating strike. But then, amidst the rising chaos, the World Tree Kotoba called out to them, telling them to calm themselves. The command froze the elves in place, and they dispelled their magic at once. The entire area fell silent, as though the looming catastrophe had been nothing more than a nightmare that evaporated upon waking. The leader of the elves stepped forward and introduced herself as Era. To Kotoba's surprise, the elves could hear his voice as well. Their faces lit up in pure joy at being able to communicate with the world tree. Realizing this, Kotoba believed that resolving the situation would now be much easier. He told the elves that fighting was strictly forbidden around him. His words left them stunned. They asked how they were supposed to drive away those monsters if they weren't allowed to fight. Arachne promptly sealed one of them shut with a strand of web, urging restraint without a word. Kotoba explained that everyone living here was his friend, and therefore the elves should treat them with respect and coexist peacefully. Since the world tree had spoken, the elves followed his guidance, offering apologies to the goblins for their harsh words and for calling them ugly monsters. After that, Miyako asked what business had brought the elves here and encouraged them to share their story before jumping to conclusions. The elves were astonished and asked if the villagers truly knew nothing about the death of the previous world tree. Kotoba hadn't even realized that world trees could die. The elf leader confirmed that the previous world tree, Lord Ushel, had recently passed away. That was why the elves had journeyed here to find the new one. But when they finally located it, they were enraged to discover an entire town built around the world tree. After listening carefully, Kotoba asked what a world tree truly was. Did multiple exist across the world? Era explained that there was only one. The largest tree in existence would naturally become the next world tree. Since Kotoba had grown into the largest tree, he had replaced the previous one. Kotoba felt guilty, thinking his growth had somehow caused the former world tree's death. Yet one question lingered. Why had monsters and some people called him a world tree even before he reached this size? Era suggested they must have sensed it beforehand, almost like an instinctive foresight. Kotoba wondered if that truly was the case, though the guilt still weighed on him. Era gently added that it wasn't entirely the world tree's fault. Such transitions were simply the world's natural principle. When a new world tree emerges, the previous one retracts or disappears, hence the elves' arrival and their wish to remain by the side of the new world tree. Kotoba didn't mind at all, but he still asked the goblins for their opinion first. Miyako reassured him that they had no issue with it either. After all, the elves had always been known as devotees of the world tree, so it would be impossible and unreasonable to drive them away. With everyone in agreement, Kotoba simply asked both sides to look after one another, and so the elves officially joined the village, becoming new allies. They brought with them deep knowledge about the world tree, knowledge even Kotoba himself had never heard before. Era began by introducing each elf one by one. However, Kotoba quickly ran into a problem. The elves' names all sounded similar, and their faces looked nearly identical to him. Remembering who was who became nearly impossible. Fortunately, their wisdom and magical skill eased any concerns about integrating into the village. They immediately began offering magical support, preserving fresh meat with ice magic, drying laundry with wind magic, and assisting with daily chores. But the biggest issue was housing. There weren't enough homes for the elves, so Linda asked if they could stay in the gathering hall temporarily. Era was puzzled why they didn't just build more houses. Linda explained that building one took several days, but Era had meant something else. Why not ask the world tree to create a house for them with his power? She politely asked Kotoba to help create new homes using his abilities, but Kotoba wasn't sure what she meant. Did she expect him to snap off a branch or something? Era suddenly realized he still had no idea what he was capable of. She explained that crafting structures was simple for a world tree, and even the previous one could instantly produce all sorts of creations. Kotoba admitted he didn't know how to do that, so he asked for guidance. Era explained that the former world tree used its roots as a medium to create various objects, even entire houses. Kotoba was stunned. Until now, he had only used his roots to grow vegetables. The idea that he could shape them into anything else had never crossed his mind. Realizing the potential, he decided to give it a genuine attempt. He focused his strength into his roots, letting them rise from the ground, and attempted to construct an entire house from them. Little by little, he shaped a simple structure, his first house made purely from imagination and root material. The villagers were amazed. Watching a house appear almost instantly felt like witnessing a miracle. But within seconds, the new house collapsed. It was too fragile. Kotoba simply lacked the experience. Era assured him this was normal. Even the previous world tree had failed at first. This only meant Kotoba still had plenty of room to grow, and imagination would be a key factor in mastering his abilities. Though disheartened by the failure, Kotoba genuinely wanted to help and apologized. Linda quickly comforted him, saying none of this was his fault. In fact, the attempt wasn't useless at all. Material from the collapsed house could still be reused. Thanks to his help, rebuilding it would be much faster than usual. Kotoba accepted that and decided to attempt another build. Linda observed closely as Kotoba continued experimenting. Confident that the world tree could dramatically speed up construction, Linda coordinated with the villagers while Kotoba summoned more roots to form houses. Each time one collapsed, the goblins used the leftover materials to rebuild sturdier versions, finishing each home much quicker than before. Over time, Kotoba gradually learned how to control his abilities, eventually reaching a point where he hardly needed anyone's help. He could craft structures far more complex than his early attempts. Eventually, he managed to create something impressive, a villa-style house entirely on his own. Linda and the others were stunned. Such a building would have taken them far longer to construct manually. Grateful, Era thanked the World Tree for building so many houses and then casually mentioned she wished to take a bath. When she asked Linda where the bathhouse was, Linda innocently asked what a bath even was. Era nearly exploded in disbelief. She demanded to know how an entire town could exist without a bathhouse. Linda explained that the river was enough for bathing, but that only horrified Era more, making the village girl suddenly feel self-conscious. Without hesitation, she begged the World Tree to build a proper bathhouse immediately. Kotoba understood what a bathhouse was, so he agreed. Using the same technique he used for houses, he summoned materials while Era supervised the construction. With the elves' magic, the heavy labor became effortless. They also handled heating the water with magic, solving the biggest obstacle. By nightfall, the grand bathhouse was complete. When the villagers stepped inside, the luxurious sight left them speechless. Just imagining bathing in such a place made them feel warm and relaxed already. Era encouraged them to try it immediately, promising they would never even think about bathing in a river again. Once they dipped in, Linda and Wolfram melted into pure bliss, as if their bodies had turned limp from sheer relaxation. Kotoba watched from above, seeing everyone enjoying the mixed baths, and secretly wished he could join them himself. And so, the day ended peacefully, with everyone smiling. Later, the elves thanked the World Tree again for all his help. To show their appreciation, they poured warm water near his roots, hoping it would soothe him as well. As the water seeped in, Kotoba genuinely felt comforted, almost as if he were reborn. The next morning, though, he felt a bit fatigued. He assumed it was from pushing his powers too hard the previous day, but it was worth it, considering how happy the elves were and how much he had learned. He even noticed he might have been using so many roots that his height seemed slightly reduced, but he dismissed it as imagination. From now on, he decided to use his abilities more carefully while familiarizing himself with them. Later that day, the elves presented their prized creation, elven liquor. Its sweet aroma alone made everyone crave a taste. Despite rumors that elven drinks included a tiny bit of elven saliva, nobody seemed to care. Kotoba certainly didn't, especially since the elves were all beautiful. Even the Slime Queen loved it. The liquor was said to have anti-aging and longevity properties. Kotoba was delighted. The more kinds of alcohol they had, the more joy it brought to the village. With that thought, he looked around at the town's bustling population and recalled the species that now lived together in harmony.